What up, VC? G Money back again for video 2 of tonight of me showing you my albums. Tonight is March 4th, 2021. In a few hours it'll be March 5th, 2021. Hard to believe that it's March already. This year's going by super fast. It felt like yesterday it was New Year's Day and it's already March. It's just shocking. It really is just shocking. Time is really just flying by. And but you know, that's just the way life is, right? And the older you get, the faster time goes by. I didn't want to make last video too long, so I just wanted to do the second part of some of my favorite albums, or not favorite albums, but albums that I've collected recently and have been listening to recently, and have a lot of cool things to show you guys. Some things in here that I don't think I've ever shown on my YouTube channel before, so I'm looking forward to this one. First up is The Cure, Pornography. One of those albums that it really has to grow on you. This is a very acquired taste, you know. I mean, it's not The Cure that everybody knows, you know. It's not Friday I'm in Love. It's not Love Song. It's not Just Like Heaven. This is a different Cure. This is early Cure. And early Cure is very different in some ways from the later, more mainstream Cure. And this is one of those albums where you kind of start to feel another side for the band. It's very dark. Some have ranked the style of this album as being gothic wave, as being new wave, and all those genres of music mixed together. And that's one thing about this album that I think is very interesting. It's very dark, but it's also very impactful in a way. And the music is very unique in its own way. And it was very different from a lot of things that were coming out at the same time. I think this was released in 1982. It doesn't sound so 1982, but it was released then, and it does stand out as an album compared to a lot of the other albums being released at that time. And that's one thing about The Cure. And I've probably said it before about The Cure, that is very interesting about their music. It stands out so much. It was very ahead of its time. And a lot of the bands that came after them were very inspired by them. A lot of those alternative bands in the 90s and the 2000s were very inspired by bands like The Cure. And this album right here is one of those albums that people would either hate or love. Personally, I love it. I think it's a fantastic album. I'm a big Cure fan, so that also adds to it. But songs like 100 Years, The Hanging Garden, A Strange Day, and then strange tunes like Pornography. They're very odd tunes, but they're also very interesting tunes, and you do get a thrill out of listening to them at the same time, even as weird as they might be. So that's one thing about The Cure that I've always really liked, and always really liked about this album, Pornography. And then going back a little bit in their catalog, just one album is their album Faith. This was released just before Pornography was released. An album similar in style a little bit to Pornography, just not as dark as Pornography. You do get a little bit of foreshadowing into what the following album is going to be on this album. But this album does hold up a little bit with their really early stuff, like the stuff off their first album, like, you know, Fire in Cairo or Boys Don't Cry, where it's a little more upbeat. There are songs that are on here that are kind of like that, like Primary, Doubt. But for the most part, the album is very, very dark and melodic. You have songs like The Funeral Party that are very, very slow, very gothic-like. The Drowning Man, Faith, those are very dark tunes. Still like them. So this is kind of a mixture album. It's like a transition album from one phase of the band to the other, and that's what I think this album kind of is. Still think the album's good though. Definitely one that, almost like Pornography, takes a little bit of time to get into. So yeah, very, very cool. Kind of in the same genre, but not quite. We have Pink Floyd, Animals, and this is the reissued version. It sounds bloody fantastic on my turntable. This is again another one of my favorite albums. Definitely one of my favorite Pink Floyd albums. Definitely one of the albums that really drew me into liking Pink Floyd. It wasn't just because the songs on here were really, are really good musically. They're great musically, but the lyrical content and the fact that they just go on for such a long time, but you prefer them that way, They're just so good that you're happy that they last that long. And that's one thing about this album that I just dig and have always dug about it. The artwork, David Gilmour's guitar is just brilliant. Roger Waters' theme writing is fantastic, drawing the inspiration of this album off the book Animal Farm. It's really good metaphor for life and the world in general, and corruption and politics and all that stuff. Dogs being the ones who are the aggressive ones, the pigs being the guys at the top, and then the sheep being those that follow and don't question anything. This album really is a good metaphor for life in the world, and just true then as it is now. And that's one thing that's very brilliant about this album. So Animals, fantastic. And the fact that they would release The Wall after this, and that before this it was Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon. The band was on a run, man. They were on a run. They were at the peak of their game, in my opinion. And yeah, I love Animals. Never get tired of that album. I finally got this album. Didn't find it in a record store. I don't go record shopping that much these days. But I did order it online, and I finally got it. And it's Iron Maiden, Live After Death, a classic live album, a classic live metal album. As far as metal history goes, it's like a major chapter in metal history. It's a big deal, this album, because it's such a fantastic live record. Everything from the production to the energy, the band just sounds absolutely fantastic on here. It's something that I really, really dig and enjoy. And I remember the first time hearing it, I loved it. I was already a big Maiden fan, was discovering Maiden, listening to all their albums. But the versions that they do on here, they're just so crystal clear. The production is so spot on, and the band is young, so they have a lot of energy themselves, and they just sound very good. I will say one thing that I think can be better on this album is the sound of the audience. I feel like the sound of the audience is kind of pushed away a little bit, because the live video and the audience, in comparison, the audience in the live video is you can definitely hear them better, and they definitely sound more energetic. But they're there. I wish they were there a little bit more. But other than that, the album is great. One thing that's very interesting about this album is that if you pull out the inner booklet, it starts showing you all the different tour dates. You got pictures on the back. And you got all the tour dates right there. Also right there. They kicked off this tour in Warsaw, Poland on August 9th, 1984. And I thought that was very interesting because Poland was still communist at that time. They didn't really allow a lot of bands to tour there. They didn't even really release music in the Eastern Bloc countries. They had bootleg pressings, but there was never official Polish pressings of albums until the Berlin Wall came down. And they were like one of the first and only bands to be able to tour Poland. And I thought that was very interesting and very very catching to me, because I've studied a little bit about that area at that time, and banging out to heavy metal was not encouraged in their society. It was highly discouraged. But in the 80s, it was getting towards the end of that regime over there, and Iron Maiden and letting the band come in to play there was definitely signaling a cultural change, which I think was very cool. So this album does have some history to it. This tour definitely has history to it. And then a reissue of one of my favorite Maiden albums, and that is Somewhere in Time. I do have an original pressing of this album, but I decided to get this reissue because a lot of the Maiden albums that I have already are reissues, and I just wanted to add this one to it because it's just one of my favorite Maiden albums, man. This album's so good, and I'll say it on this channel, it's so good. All the songs in here, Caught Somewhere in Time, Wasted Years is classic. Love Sea of Madness, Heaven Can Wait, another classic, epic song. The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, epic. Stranger in a Strange Land, epic. Deja Vu, Alexander the Great. One thing that's nice about having a copy of this album, or a reissue of this album, is that on my original copy, the song Deja Vu skips. It gets stuck. So I have to get up and move the needle over like a few grooves so I can get rid of the skipping. And it's kind of annoying. So I know for a fact on this album it doesn't do that. And it just sounds great too. One thing about these maiden reissues, depending on the ones that you're looking for, if you're looking at the 80s pressings and listening to them, is that they are a little quiet. They're more quiet than the originals. And that happens to be the case with a lot of reissues. I noticed that with Life After Death is that, you know, great sound, great punch, all that stuff, but to really get the feel of the album and have it not be too quiet, you do have to turn it up because they do squeeze a lot on the one side. I mean, you have side one and it's like Churchill's Speech, Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Trooper, Revelations, and Fight of Icarus. Those are some pretty long songs on there, and it's all squeezed onto one side. And it's the same with the last side too, where you have 22 Acacia Avenue, Children of the Damned, Die With Your Boots On, Wrathchild at the beginning, and then it ends with Phantom of the Opera, which is like a 7-minute song. Other than that, it sounds great. Not complaining. So yeah, great to have those maiden pressings. Let me flip this over real quick. Right now we are listening to Tool, Lateralis, an epic masterpiece in my opinion. Many, many, many epic and classic Tool songs on that album. And that brings me to the next album that I've been banging out to lately, and that is Tool, Lateralis. This here is a bootleg pressing of the album. This is not an official pressing. Very few Tool pressings are original. I think the only ones that they've pressed originally are Undertow and Lateralis. I do have a copy of 10,000 Days that does seem to be pretty official, but I don't know if it is that official. Either way, it's great. But man, I will say that for a bootleg pricing, though, this is a fantastic sounding album. It comes on this cool purple vinyl, and the sound quality is superb. I don't even really need to turn it up that loud, and the first song, The Grudge, just comes blasting through your speakers, and you just get that Tool feel, you get that Maynard feel, you get it all, man. And this is just one hell of an album to listen to. It's just, it's so good the way it flows. The Grudge, The Patient, Schism, which is the song that's playing right now, Parabola, Take Some Leeches is probably some of my favorite Danny Carey drumming. Excellent drumming on there. Lateralis, Disposition, Reflection, Triad, all good stuff on here. Definitely a classic album. I think this was 2001 this came out. I believe it was 2001. Very, very good album. Very, very good album. Here's another that I've been listening to lately, if I can get it out. The most recent, Sphere Inoculum. You know what? Not a bad album, man. Really not a bad album. You just gotta listen to it a few times to really, really get a feel for it. And I think the artwork is just some of the coolest artwork ever, man. You open it up, you get that cool gatefold. And one thing about this album that I think is very, very cool, and I will have to listen to this more, is that they are very, very progressive rock on here. You know, Fear Inoculum, Noma, Invincible, Descending, Calling Voices, 7 Empest, 15 minutes long. I mean, that's pretty impressive, man. If you're a big progressive rock fan and you like Tool, you gotta say Tool put out quite an album, unlike a lot of their others. And that was one cool thing about this. And I was planning on seeing them on this tour, which, you know, most of it got canceled because, you know, everything locked down. But yeah, man, was looking forward to seeing. You know, at the time, I didn't know a whole lot about Tool. You know, I have a coworker who's really into them, and he kind of introduced me and turned me on to them, and I decided to start listening to them, and I don't regret it. Don't regret it at all. They are my kind of band. And then last, differs from a lot of the others, But this is an album that I really love. I love the sound of it. I love the feel of it. I think the keyboard composition on this album and by this band, they do a really good job at it. And that's M83. Saturdays equals youth. Really good. I really like it personally. I do like a lot of the modern new wave stuff. A lot of that 80s inspired 2000 stuff. Because I am a big 80s new wave guy, but I also really like the stuff that has been inspired by that. And it has been inspired by it to the point where, you know, it's got this cool modern sound to it. It's got great production, and it's got a really good feel to it. And I think this album has a very good feel to it overall. It is very emotional though. It's very spacey and very out there and very, you know, you got to be in the right mood to listen to it. That's all I can say. You got to be in the right mood to listen to an album like this. And I really do like the songs on here, like Kim and Jesse is a pretty well-known song. Skin of the Night, Too Late, beautiful. Re-Own the Sky, Dark Moves of Love. And then the last song on here, Midnight Stoles Still Remain, is 11 minutes of just meditative keyboard sounds. I don't know what they were thinking, but I think that can be shortened a little bit. Still not bad. I remember listening to it the first time, and I was just very, you know, kind of drifting off and stuff like that. One thing that's weird about this album, though, is that artwork is a very odd picture of choice. You know, you got all these people or kids, if you want to put it like that, on here. All these different characters. I think what's funny about this album cover is it does remind me of all the theater kids I went to high school with, who were an odd bunch. They were an odd bunch, but there were a lot of different theater kids. Not all of them are weird. And you had a lot of them that acted like that, and looked like that, and behaved like that, like these two right here. They're just weird kids, man. They're just weird kids. And this album cover kind of reminds me of it, which is funny. Yeah, man, so M83 is a likable band of mine. And yeah, cool to have this one. Alright, I think that's it for recent listens and stuff like that. Guys, hit that like button. Again, keep inspired, keep discovering new and great music. Keep engaging in things that keep you in that good and positive headspace. Alright, you guys take care. Peace and amen.